So at the Institute for the Future, for the past 50 years, we've been focused on trying to understand the interaction of technology and human organization, how the two co-evolve. There's a famous phrase attributed to Marshall McLuhan who said, apparently, we invent our technologies and thereafter our technologies reinvent us. So we're constantly in this process of together innovating around technologies and social organization, how we work, how we live, what does entertainment look like with this new generation of technologies. And in my particular work, I've been really interested in what's happening with work and jobs and the kind of transformations we're going through with the emergence of various kinds of platform like Uber or DoorDash or all kinds of platforms that seem to be emerging, new one every day. And it's common in Silicon Valley to think about that, oh my gosh, it's my sheer brilliance through which I invented these platforms, I invented these technologies. And we step back and say, really, it's not about Uber and these platforms. What they enable has been built out over many, many decades, probably 30 or 40 years of generations of technologies that enable something like Uber and all these other platforms. So let's unpack what are these technologies that we built over the last 30, 40 years, because each of these generations gives new sort of affordances, allows us to do things in new ways or in different ways, and also in the process creates new opportunities and new challenges. But all these things are additive, and that's what's enabling all these platforms and evolution. So let's go back to 1980s. That's really the emergence of email, the internet, diffusion, all these early communications technologies, right? And what does it allow us? It allows us greater access. So now you can reach people outside of your organization, outside of your geography. You can potentially hire people, engage them in collaborating. So it creates this great access at the level that we've never seen before. So on top of that, what are we adding in 1990s? We're adding mobile technologies and sensors. And sensors are really important, particularly the geolocation sensors. So it's interesting that with all these beyond geographies, what do you do when you first call somebody on your phone, right? What's the first question you ask usually? Where are you, right? Because that's what gives you context. Are you in a conference? Which means you can't probably talk. Are you around? Are you in this location, that location? And we're adding all kinds of additional sensors that allows us greater context, greater understanding who's around you, what might be your needs, even your mood now. But we're adding all these things and we're making them portable and available every time, anytime, any place. And then, of course, once you bring all that data, everything becomes a data and comes with data, it gives you more intelligence. So you can match things, you can allow to deliver things to people who need them at that particular time and in that particular context. And really, that is the infrastructure that we've built that's enabling this new generation of platforms, whether they're Uber or many, many others. And I think we're kind of at the early stages of utilizing all these technologies and redefining what work is and how we do work. Basically, it allows us to do various kinds of things. We call it the economy of digital coordination because it allows us to coordinate and do things in a different way, right? And what it enables us to do is instead of it takes jobs that are maybe 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever they are and divide them into tasks, into smaller bits that basically I can engage anybody in this large network that I have access to with the right skills and right abilities to fulfill those tasks. And most importantly, a lot of that coordination and matching is actually not done by humans. It's done by algorithms. It's done by these programs, right? So if you think about organizations, and the main function of a lot of organizations is coordination for coordination of these various complex scaled activities, we now have a new technology for doing these kinds of things, for accomplishing this kind of coordination. Now, I think of institutions as a kind of technology. It's a social technology. And it's something, we didn't always live in large formal organization. It's not something that's preordained. It's something that evolved over time. And it doesn't mean that before we had these technologies, we were sitting around doing nothing. We were creating, we were doing things, but we were doing it on a different scale. And we had different set of technologies available. So we've created over the last probably 100, maybe 200 years, this mechanism for allowing us to conduct these economic activities on a scale that we've never been able to do before. And this is exactly, this particular social technology is in some way being disrupted. We have now a new suite of technologies to do this kind of scaling, to do this kind of coordination. So I don't know if this looks familiar. This is from CDC. This is a kind of technology. This is an org chart. I don't know if it looks familiar. Probably does. We've all lived in these kinds of organizations. This is the best technology we've had for coordinating and getting things done. And now we have these new suites of technologies to do it. So it bypasses some of those hierarchical organizations. It says, somebody here needs something, and somebody else here has this ability to deliver these things, and APIs, there's these basically pieces of program that allows you to match those in need with those who has this ability to fulfill the need. And so this is a new technology. This is a new kind of social technology that we're evolving. And increasingly, we're going to be able to do things with this new suite of technologies in a different way. So just to say that it's not just about, sorry, it's not just about Uber. So actually early on when everybody was focused on Uber and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we wrote a paper that said it's not about Uber. So this is an example. We created this platform called iCEO. You can read about it in the Harvard Business Review. And basically, it's a platform that applies the same principle of coordination, algorithmic coordination, to knowledge work, to our work as researchers. So we asked ourselves a question. So if you applied the same suite of technologies to research and writing reports and the kind of work we do, what happens? So we created this recipe, basically a piece of technology that allowed you to break up the task of doing a research report into pieces. And we used various kind of crowd platforms like Upwork and TaskRabbit and others. There's probably other ones here in Europe to engage large groups of people in helping us do these tasks. So in the process, what's the first phase of doing research? You look at bibliography. Who else has written something about this topic? So we basically recruited people using some machine learning algorithms, identified people who can do this task on Upwork. And so we created this great bibliography. That was the first part of the recipe. The next part of the recipe was, okay, summarize what are the key points in this research. So we recruited the next batch of people, and they did this kind of work. And then we asked, okay, well then rank. What are the important pieces of this work? And other group of people ranked and curated this work. And at the end of 2 weeks, we had this amazing research report where when I looked at it, I said, we never are doing research the same way again. Because for a small organization, all of a sudden, we were able to reach people who are signed up on Upwork. They were university professors, they were editors from Inc. magazine, and the kind of resources that for us were unimaginable that we would have access to. And so it's an example that it shows us that it's not just about low-skilled work. It's actually these technologies are enabling us to do things in a very, very different way. And I don't think it's about just Uber. It's about all kinds of work that we're reconfiguring and are doing in new ways. And increasingly we'll be able to do that, including kind of sophisticated or what we think high-knowledge work. So, and the other thing is that this is kind of the first generation of technologies. Increasingly, we're engaging basically with the Internet of Things, where objects and other things are embedded with connectivity and intelligence and all these same capabilities. Increasingly, machines are going to be negotiating with each other So think about the self-driving car. If I have a self-driving car and I own it, for example, maybe I can program it that it rents itself out, and maybe it demands the best rates and rents it out using those kind of algorithms, economic algorithms, right? So basically, these objects are creating their own economy, or they're creating economy with us. They're becoming all kind of economy of things. So new tasks and new things we will be able to do with these kinds of technologies. As I said, I think we're at the early stages of this transformation. So all of these things are potentially exciting. They're also potentially scary, and there are risks and challenges involved in these kinds of transformations. So I just wanted to outline some of the things that I see kind of as challenges, something we need to solve for. So we talk about these platforms like Uber, and Facebook is a platform, Google is a platform. A lot of more of our interactions and a lot of our work is increasingly being done through these kinds of platforms. And there are a lot of issues with them. So one of the issues with something like Uber, for example, is that, of course, the drivers, the problem is that these platforms create tremendous economic benefits to investors and the founders of these platforms, but they're not creating the same level of benefits for people who are sustaining their livelihoods on these platforms, including the fact that none of the Uber drivers, not only they don't get any benefits like retirement and pension and all the traditional benefits, but they have no ownership stake in companies, in this platform. They're not owners of these platforms. And if you worked in a company like GM, for example, in 50s and 60s, you were likely also owned stock in GM. So you were an economic participant in that kind of innovation. And so that's an issue here. A lot of work that we've been doing is really looking at what does a positive platform look like? What is a platform that we can develop that works not just for investors and for people who are founders, but also works for people who are basically sustaining their livelihoods from these platforms. Similarly, we all work for Facebook or Google or others. They're capitalizing on our data, right? Are we able to generate we're getting tremendous social benefit from it, right? Connectivity, all kinds of other things, but we're not necessarily getting as much economic benefit from it. How do you what does a positive platform look like going forward? So that's one issue that's important. The other one, and it's particularly in the US, the issue of the social safety net that in the US in particular was created 1950s when everybody worked in GM and all your benefits and everything was tied to your retirement, your health care, your training. All of these things were basically tied to your employment. That is not the same for Europe, so I do think it's an easier transformation here in many ways, but we need to solve what does the 21st century social safety net look like in this world of platforms. There are a lot of regulatory issues related to that. For example, some of them, just to share, is reputations are very important on these platforms. That's how you get your pay. That's how you get your access to the next gig, to the next job, to the next task. How transparent are these platforms about these reputations? Can people own these reputations? Can they be portable? Can I port my reputation from this platform to the next platform? Who has ownership of all the data that's generated on these platforms? Am I allowed to own this data? All kinds of issues, and in addition to the network effects of these platforms, which easily drive them to become monopolies. So that's a regulatory issue. The other big issue, and I think that's something that we'll have to grapple with in the next probably decade, is that as people are not attached necessarily to a particular workplace or a firm, so much of how we've kind of found meaning in our lives and community has come with this engagement in full-time employment. That's not just a source of pay, it's a source of community, it's a source of social connections, it's a source of training, all of these things. So what are the new places where we can find these communities, meaning, and other things for people who are not necessarily working 9-to-5 jobs in formal organizations? And the last thing, we talk about skills. We've done a lot of ethnographic research with people who are working in this on-demand economy. And I can tell you, a lot of skills are needed to be successful in this world of on-demand work, including financial management. People are having trouble figuring out whether they're actually making money on these platforms or not. You need a lot of financial savvy to be able to be successful on these platforms. Reputation building, being able to collaborate and bring tribes together quickly to accomplish some things. These are not the kind of things we're teaching kids in high school or colleges or other places. This is the learning curve to be successful on these platforms is really steep. So I think these are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about. I believe that once these technologies are out of the box, we can't put them back in. That never happens. We can regulate them, we can shape them, and I think our big task is to take advantage of these technologies and shape them so that they create good and social value and solve for some of these challenges. Thank you. Oh.